This episode of CelloChat is brought to you by Carriage House Violins of Johnson String Instrument. Please visit us at www.carriagehouseviolins.com.
Okay, great. And we are live.
Okay. All right. Okay, well, hello, everyone. First of all, just let me start by thanking the folks here at Cello Bello for inviting me to visit with you all today. And I think Cello Bello is just this incredible wealth of information for all things cello, and a special thanks to Paul Katz for having the vision to make this whole site come to life and to continue to bring us such high quality pedagogy and history and stories to the world. So if you aren't already subscribed to Cello Bello's newsletter, I encourage you to do that. And they also rely on donations in order to keep the site running. So just throwing that out there. All right, and I'm joining you today as part of Cello Bello's Adult Learner Series. And in this series, you hear from educators who work regularly and primarily with adults. And that's where I come in. Okay, so here's a little bit of information about me. I am Carolyn Hagler, and I am the founder of CelloDiscovery.com, and it's an affordable online school to help adults learn how to play the cello. It's kind of the Pandora's box of cello pedagogy. We also do an in-person summer workshop in San Rafael, so if you're looking for a summer camp, that's another thing that we do. That's an in-person event. So I have been playing the cello for over 50 years, and I've been teaching for the last 40 of those years. I have a master's degree in music, and I'm a tenured cellist with the Austin Symphony Orchestra. I also co-direct the Austin Cello Choir, which is a community of cellists of all ages and all abilities, and I've played in lots of chamber ensembles over the years, and I've done a lot of recording for a wide range of artists. I also have a lot of teaching experience. I taught in the acclaimed University of Texas String Project for 3 years when I first moved to Texas as a graduate student. And I currently hold a teaching certification in the state of Texas. I've taught a wide range of people from all age and all abilities, but in the last many years, I have focused almost exclusively on adults. And then when the pandemic hit, I pretty much went exclusively online. Okay, enough about me. So today the topic that I want to talk to you about is learning how to become your best teacher. And perhaps you thought when you first saw that title was, what? How am I supposed to be, my best teacher if I'm so early in the game and I don't really know what I'm doing, let alone what I'm doing wrong? Well, here's my take on it. The thing is that most of what you are doing is self-teaching. Probably 80% of the applied time with your cello, as in, the bow on the string, really is autodidactic learning. And many of the frustrations and you feel when you learn this instrument, it's likely due to the fact that you haven't really learned how to teach yourself the cello. And if you're studying with a private instructor, those wonderful little nuggets of information doled out to you at your lesson, they're usually not going to be enough to sustain you because you have to do the work. And it is hard work. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to break down some specific tools that you can use to continue to learn this awesome and intimidating instrument. And I'm pretty sure we probably have a variety of folks watching today. You're going to probably fill that gap between brand new, newbie. Congrats to you. And I know we have people that are going to be at the upper intermediate level and possibly beyond that. And some of you take lessons in person, some of you take lessons online, and others of you are just going about this entirely self-taught, which I kind of don't recommend because you really do need some check-ins and periodic guidance. It's very important when you're learning. Okay, well, let's talk about the situation with your private one-on-one instructor. We know that there's literally no disputing the fact that if you have an experienced teacher and they've got all the awesome playing chops and they've got all the pedagogy skills and they're very sensitive to your needs as an adult learner, then you've got the rock star, you got a winner. So the best thing is to do is hang on to that teacher for as long as you can. But however, students have a tendency to rely far too much on the teacher. I mean, they really want the teacher to get them from point A to point Y. So how much time do you actually spend with this teacher? Let's break that down. On a good month, let's just say 4 times. So that's maybe 4 hours in a week, 4 hours in a month. And that's if you take an hour lesson. And I think there's other people that just take a lesson every other week. So that narrows it down to about 2 hours a month. Okay, so of those 2 hours, realistically, how much time during those lessons is spent truly dialed in and focused directly on your specific technical issues? How much of that time is you playing through music or simply visiting with your teacher? So my point is that there is a very minimal amount of time spent with the teacher throughout that month. And what about the remaining time in that month? Well, it's just you. That's why you need to learn how to be your best teacher. That is, of course, unless you don't practice, So, okay, remember this, that your teacher or any good teacher is simply a good guide. And they are there to teach you fundamentals of excellent cello technique and to give you the appropriate repertoire to help you hone in those skills. But they alone are not the ultimate authority on the cello, because nobody is. And they can't make you, this monster beast of a cellist, because you have to do that. That's your job. So when it's just you practicing alone in the room without your teacher, you've got to figure out how to take all that guidance that you've been given from your teacher or from an online course, and you have to make the necessary changes. You have to make the necessary adjustments and necessary improvements. Okay, it's time to break that down a little bit. So what I did is I kind of brought down 7 thoughts that I want to share with you, some things that I think, just to get the brain thinking a little bit. All right, so thought number 1. Does this sound familiar? I can't play this piece. It sounds horrible. Nothing sounds very good. I can't do this. Well, why? So this day and age, you are lucky to be learning in a time when all you have to do is pick up your cell phone and record yourself. Really record yourself. And I know that those iPhone recordings, they sound pretty awful, but you have to do it, because without recording yourself, you aren't hearing those things that you should be hearing. It's very different when you play versus when you play and listen back to it. So if you can sound really good on a bad device, you're going to sound, excellent on a better device. Okay, so this is how you go about doing that. Of course, what you need to do first thing is get your phone, take your phone out, or your iPad, or your laptop, and you're going to record yourself playing the troublesome passage. Now, you don't get to re-record it. You record it, and you don't go, oh man, that was terrible, I'm going to do that again. You just one shot. You record it, what you do is what you get. Then what you're going to do is you're going to grab a pencil and your sheet music, or if you're working from an iPad, some way to notate your music on your iPad. And then you're going to really intently listen, and very objectively listening, because what you're going to want to do is go, oh my God, I sound terrible, this is awful. So you want to make sure that you avoid all that trash talking when you listen to the video. This is about you correcting some things that are a problem. Then you're going to make a list of 3 really important things that you want to improve. So for example, like you want to, let's say that you're having trouble with a specific shift, or maybe you're having trouble getting a certain passage really in tune, or maybe your rhythm is off, or maybe you missed the key signature, whatever. You're gonna pick 3 things, and you're gonna be very specific about what it is that you don't like, that you want to improve. And if you're not really sure, you can always take that video and you're going to slow it way, way down when you watch it, because oftentimes when you see yourself play, you're going to get the clues. You're like, oh, that's what I did, which you can't always see it when you're watching something quickly. So once you've done that, then at that point, you have honestly heard how you sound. And then from that point, you're going to work just super Zen-like, I like to call it, on those 3 passages. And you're going to be hearing and you're going to be feeling what you're doing, because you have to just open those ears and seriously just listen. It's going to be the kind of thing gonna see if I can play an example. Something that you're working on and you just don't like your tuning. Let's say you've gotten that third double stop really out of tune. So you're going to listen to that and you're going to really hear, you're really going to hear it. So that's what the Zenlike work is, you just being very open and aware with your ears to hear what you're doing. And then you're going to just do that. So when you feel like you've actually made some progress, you've worked through these things, you feel like it's gotten better, then you're going to record it again. And you're going to go through the same steps again. It's a very slow, very careful way to work through this. And that's a good way to practice. And if you don't want to write all this down, by the way, I have a detailed blog on my website, Cello Discovery. The blog is called Learning to Practice Better, Better Habits Equal Better Results, because I lay this all down step by step, if that's helpful. Okay, number 2. I'm going to put this down because I'm going to share my screen in just a minute. So one of the questions I get asked a lot is, how do I know? How do I know if I've really learned a piece of music and I'm ready to move on? Especially if you're working something that's sequential, some kind of book that has you go piece by piece. How do you know? So my take on this is that you need to get some data and you need to ponder the data. So just because you want to move on in a piece, or maybe your teacher told you to move on, the question is, are you really ready to move on? So remember, you're the teacher 80% of the time, and so you need to learn how to assess your current abilities. I have an assessment that I made for Cello Discovery, kind of pulls back from my public school teaching days, which I think really works well. And I think I'm going to be able to share that. So I'm going to share my screen. I gotta find it here. Hold on. Sorry, guys. Okay, I think this is it. Yeah, there it is. Yep, there it is. Okay. So what I have here is what I call the playing test evaluation. You can do whatever you want on this. I just think it's good to visually see something and be able to notate it. Of course, you know your name. You don't have to put that on there, but I think it's really good to put the date of the piece, and then whatever it is that you're working on, go ahead and put the name of that in there. So what you're going to do next is you're going to basically give yourself a grading system, because you're going to play something and then you're going to listen back and you're going to evaluate it. So the way this particular scale works is that one means that you never demonstrated that skill. Number 2 is that you sometimes demonstrate that skill. Number 3 is that you usually do. And number 4, the rock star came out and you're always demonstrating that. Okay, now this section here, you can do whatever you want. I just feel like at an early stage of playing, these are probably some pretty important elements that you want to have in place. So what I did here is instrument positioning. So whatever it is that you want to put in here that's the problem for you, then you're going to put your, grading number in here. Again, 1 is, you didn't do so hot. 4 is you're amazing. So you're going to go through each of these things and watch your video and listen to your video. And then what you're going to do is you give yourself a grade on each one of these things. Now, when you total it all up, here you go. If you got this many points, I think it's probably fair to say that you've learned what you need to learn from this piece and you can move on. If you were good at this piece, I think you're probably about ready to move on, but it wouldn't hurt to spend a little more time. If you're fair, I think you just definitely need to go back to the practice room before you're ready to move on. And below 14, yep, definitely get back in that practice room. So that's just something you can use. I will see if we can actually add this for you somewhere when I finish here, so that if you want to use that, it's something you can do. Okay, stop sharing here. Okay. All right, so that is the data. You got to get the data and analyze the data. Then you know if you're ready to move on. Okay, the next thought is, does this also sound familiar? my shoulder hurts, my thumb hurts, various things on your body hurt. Well, learning how to play and learning how to teach yourself, it also means learning how to listen to your body. And we've heard this before in other areas of our lives. But some of you are probably really good at this because you already do yoga or you do meditation. So you're kind of in touch with what that means. You just need to learn how to apply that to what you know on the cello. But we're fortunate enough to be able to play an instrument which allows us to sit fairly relaxed in our chair. We get to sit, of course, which is great. You want to make sure that everything feels like gravity's pulling you down, nice passive weight flowing into the cello. Details about, should my thumb be directly here, over this finger, exactly over this finger? Sometimes those things aren't as much, they shouldn't be as much of a consideration because every body is unique. Every body is unique. Everybody has a very different length of arms, length of forearms, hand spacing, girth of the palm, finger length. So no one size fits all. And that's one of the things that you have to do. It's better for you to do than an outside teacher because they're not quite as aware of your body, of course, than you are. So you really know what your body has a tendency to do. So you should get to know that because that's going to help you as you learn to play. For example, if we talk about hand spacing, I always think it's really good when you think about a bow hold. What is your get to know your hand? What does your hand naturally want to do? Where are the spaces? Which spaces are bigger than others? What are the tendencies of fingers? And what we want to do is find a way to get our hand onto that bow to produce a beautiful sound without putting pressure. Pressure usually means pain. So this is really not what we want. We want a real passive weight. So the more relaxed we can get placing our hand on the bow, we get that passive weight, and in turn we get a better sound and we don't have pain when we play. So those sorts of little elements you can think about all throughout your playing. You just want to continuously release tension. I had a student on my website this last week and she posted a video of her performing. And at one point, she's about 8 or 9 months into learning, there's a 4-measure rest. And during those 4-measure rests, she put her arm out and she relaxed her shoulders, pardon me, and she really tried to release the tension from her body. Sorry, I need that water. So as much as you can, release tension from your body. That's how you're going to get a better sound and a more relaxed sound. The other thing you want to do is think about your bow arm especially. You have to think about this in terms of a series of gears, all the way from the shoulder, elbow, wrist, fingers, and each gear has a direct effect on how the next gear moves. So try not to put a stopgap in there somewhere by creating a lot of tension that you don't want. Just think about how those gears affect each other and how they move together. All right, thought number 4, and this one I think is kind of interesting. Pardon me. When you play, since you're trying to hear yourself the best you can, close your eyes more often when you play. Something really magical happens when you just simply close your eyes. When you take away that sight, you're much more tuned into the sound, how everything sounds, how everything feels. And I'm sure you've watched performers on YouTube and places, and there are moments that their eyes are really closed. And it's because they're very focused on that melody. They're very focused on the music, the phrasing, everything. It's a focus that they can get better when they close their eyes. So try practicing. If it's something you have memorized, just try closing your eyes and practice. And that really does wonders. It also helps when you think about balancing on the strings. Sometimes we rely too much on looking at balancing on strings. And if you close your eyes, you have to actually really think differently because you have to balance with the weight of your arm on that string and you're not relying on watching everything so much. So try that. Thought number 5 has to do with practice time. Probably a lot of you by this point have heard this. I was raised in a generation that was very different from this, where you put in X amount of hours is what you have to do. But I don't think you should ever put a time allocation on your practice time. You definitely want to put a goal in mind instead. You can get way, way, way more substantial practice accomplished in a much shorter time period when you do really focused practice versus just some kind of time allocated practice. Sorry, I'm just kind of peeking at chats over there. I did an interview with Beyonce a couple months ago for Cello Discovery, and he told us that when he was preparing for the Tchaikovsky competition the first time around, he practiced like 8-9 hours every single day. And he said 7.5 hours of those were absolute junk practice. He said, but the second time around, he did this really intense focused practice, and he ended up winning 3rd place. So the point of this is that even the best go through this, okay? All right, so thought number 6, and this is big, big, big. You have to use the metronome. You really, really do. I rarely used the metronome when I was younger. I used to say I couldn't stay with it. I couldn't hear it. I would play and I just drowned it out. And I've heard this from others too, so I know that all that is very true. But when I finally learned how to play with the metronome, it was absolutely a key ingredient to the transformation of my playing. So I hear students play all the time, and I know that so many issues are going to be resolved by simply learning how to play in time with a metronome. When we play fast, our tendency is to rush, because these internal clocks, they're not great. We think they're great, but they're not great. And also when you feel nervous, we go faster. It's just, we're built to do that. Anyway, so eventually you're going to hear it, and eventually you're going to stay with it. I have several members on Cello Discovery who kicking and screaming, I can't do it, I won't do it, but they did. And I know that they're making tremendous progress just because they spent that time learning how to play with the metronome, because it solves a lot of problems just learning how to do that. Okay, thought number 7. So I'm probably going to get some slack for this, but it's okay because I think it needs to be said. You don't have to be confined to the Suzuki literature as an adult. I think there's a lot of great stuff to come from that. But I can hear it already. What? But there's a whole lot of other fabulous music literature out there. So just don't pigeonhole yourself into this particular material. And you don't need to use essential elements either, because there's a ton of stuff missing from that book. But I know a lot of people don't know where to start. So good places to start, but there's a lot of other stuff too. I think many of you know that I'm so sorry. I'm a huge fan of the Irish cellist, pianist, composer, Alva McDonough. I just came across her music one day and I was just floored. So a lot of her material actually is in the Baby RSM testing literature. It is so well written for the cello because she's a great cellist on top of that and a pianist. I recently recorded one of her pieces and I have it on my YouTube channel if you want to get a flavor of what her music is like. But don't be intimidated by that piece because she's got a lot of stuff. It's for the beginner level as well. And her books are called It's a Cello Thing 1 and 2. And I encourage you to also go check out other contemporary composers and other literature, because there's a ton of great stuff out there that's really interesting and educational and beautiful. Okay, I got that off my chest. Okay, let me cough one more time and get some water. It's big allergy season here in Austin, Texas, so we can't escape it. Okay. So I have some more thoughts. A lot of times when you sit down to practice, you know, you're the sleuth, you're the detective. You got to figure out what's wrong. And there's about 7 things-ish that you might be doing which are having a negative impact on your sound. These are things that I see over and over when I teach. So you might take note, because one of these things might be one of the keys to you getting a better sound. So the first thing is your bow is moving before your left hand gets in place. So just remember, your left hand always wins. You lose, you win. It's just always how it is. So when you practice this, our tendency is to want to do both at the same time, or you're going to get a kind of a sloppy sound that you may not notice so much now, but as you get better, you're going to hear that in you and other people's playing. So you want to start by practicing it, and then left hand, right hand, left hand, right hand, so forth, and so on. That seems very elementary, but it's a very important part to playing well. You can speed that up eventually, make that gap less. And then eventually, it's going to be not even noticeable. So practice left hand and right hand. If you aren't sure if you're doing that, again, take that video, slow it down and go, aha, they both went the same time, or the bow tried to get there first. You lose, you win. So just remember that. The second thing that might be giving you trouble is that the ratio of the weight, the speed, and the contact bow are off, and you haven't thought about bow distribution. So I'm going to give you an example. I'll play something that probably a lot of you know, which is the French folk song. I'm going to play it once where my weight, my speed, my bow distribution is off, and I'm going to play it again where it's right. So hopefully you can see this okay. Then there's this. Anyway, so that is one of the things that you can do, is work through that bow distribution, making sure that that's correct. If you hear too much of a crunchy sound, you probably have too much weight. If you hear a floaty sound, maybe not enough weight, contact point going all over, you can fix that. The third thing is you're not taking enough time to really get from note to note. And what I mean by this is being extremely present on every note. Now, I know it's hard to think, well, if it goes fast, how do I have time to be present? Well, you do. You just have to move your brain faster. So you have to be very present on every note. So just think, you're speaking, you're telling a story when you're playing. So just don't rush it, For example, like that, where you're really aware of every note. When you can be very present on every note, you're always going to make a better impression on your audience. So your intonation might be off because you are not completely aware of the spatial distance between the notes, or you aren't using any reference pitch to work from. Cool thing is we have a drone pitch built into our instrument. It's called the open string. So you could be playing something on the D string using your G string as your drone. So your pitch gets better when you have something to reference it to. That's why just anytime you can check with an open string, that's a really good way to do it. Spatial distance, on the other hand, is how far is that? I don't know. But I'm going to get a feel for how far my hand moves to do that. Like, I'm not going to overshoot because I know about how far it is. So just getting used to what that distance is between notes and starting to be aware and feeling that is definitely going to give you some better intonation. Okay. The other thing is your intonation might also be off because you're thinking more about note to note and you're not thinking about position to position. So note to note means I'm thinking about going from a B to a C sharp. Hard to do it that way. Your mind should be thinking, okay, this is my village, as Rick Mooney calls it. I love that expression. This is your village, first position village. So everything that's in this first position is where you get to play in that hand position. Should be fairly in tune because you don't have to shift. And then we're going to go to this village up here. Well, that's where that F sharp is. So you're going to go from this village to this village. And basically it's these two hand motions. So when I go, I'm really thinking about position to position. So if you start to reframe your thinking about a B to an F sharp, more like a first position to a fourth position, that's going to help you better. And you don't even need to know the names of the positions. I don't see that that's really necessary for you to go, okay, lower second position, upper second, third. I don't think you need to know that. You just basically need to know where all the half steps are in these positions in here. Once you know where the half steps fall, that's what you need to know. So you can practice something like started in first position, and you're gonna go half step up. So you can start in half position. Half step up. So things like that will help your hand move in half step progressions. And when you can learn those half step progressions, I think that you're going to probably play better in tune if you know where those are. Okay, regarding bowing and fingerings, just keep in mind that what works well from one person doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to work well for another person. So unless you're taking an exam or an audition that specifically requires that you use those bowings and those fingerings, well, take some time to figure out what works best for you. For your hand, you might have a short third finger or an extra long first finger or not a very wide, you can't stretch very far. Well, there's fingerings that you're going to have to come up with that work better for you, that allow you to play it better in tune and therefore give a better performance. So again, this is an editor's version that you're looking at. Again, if it's something you have to do, then do it. But if it's not something you have to do, find a fingering that's logical, that makes sense, that you can do. Okay, and the last little thought on this is it's about tuning. So tune your cello every single time you sit down to play, because it could have gotten bumped, the weather could have changed. Every single time you sit down, because you cannot learn how to play in tune unless your cello's in tune. And not like, but actually really, really listen to the pitch. So if you have a pencil, I think this is something that you might want to write down, because some of you don't know what to tune it to. So as a cellist, we tune to Pythagorean tuning. So I'm going to give you the hertz that you're going to look at. When you open up your phone and you say, if you're using the TE tuner or whatever tuner, it's going to give you the hertz somewhere on there. If you tune to these hertz, you're actually tuning to Pythagorean method of tuning. So your A is tuned to 220 hertz. When you get to the D, that's going to be 146.6. Now, I know sometimes it's hard to get right to the 6. If you get to the 5, you're probably okay. If you're at this 0.7, you're probably okay. But try to get A 220, D is 146.6. Your G is tuned to 97.7. And your C string is tuned to 65.1. So don't use equal tuning on your phone app, because pianos use equal tuning and we do not. So just make sure you're using that. If you've got those hertz, your intervals are going to be perfectly in perfect fifths. So that's that. Last little things to leave you with is something I consider accountability and engagement with others. I really believe that the social component to learning is a lot more important than maybe you think that it is. So when you get the courage, I was going to say if, but when you get the courage to play for others, which you should, you do have this extra added accountability that you need to play your part and play your part well. And then you also have something to look forward to, and that's playing with others. I mean, and that's what makes music so special, is the act of sharing music for and with others. And you are going to become a better player when you learn to play with others. And it can also help you work through that dreaded performance anxiety that we all know about. So you're going to have to deal with that too at some point, but that's a whole nother topic. Anyway, I think what I want to finish with is, for those of you that are learning cello as an adult, remember that you're doing this, you made this decision to do it. So something or someone has motivated you to do it, and you really wanted to. So for those who reach out to me, sometimes they're in their 70s and they're like, I'm 70, I'm 71, I don't even know if I can do this. Well, I just say, absolutely you can do this. I had a recent member share a wonderful performance of hers that I just was so taken with. I asked her if I could put it on the website. So on my home page, if you scroll down, you can see one of my dear members playing right smack at 1 year she's been playing, and she got to play with her husband for the first time. And she's in her 70s, sorry. But anyway, if you look at that, you can see, okay, I can do this. So, congrats to all of you, because you chose the best instrument there is, right? And you know that this is by no means an easy road, but barring some sort of hindrance, physical or other hindrance, learning to play it is definitely something you can do. So work on learning to be your best teacher, and fill your practice time with very careful listening and very careful playing, because what you put into it is what you get out of it. And remember to be kind to yourself, okay? All right. And with that, that's about all I have for what I wanted to share with you. So if we have any questions, I will go ahead and answer those. But I'm trying to find the chat. Where is the chat? Oh, there we go. Okay, so the first question was, what is my favorite cello method book? So the Sebastian Lee stuff is great. I really like his music. So method books, this is a little bit of a can of worms, because I really think that there's just so many different method books out there, and you just have to find one that's sequential, but you're not necessarily going to know what that is. I think the Essential Elements has a lot of holes in there. That was developed for public schools. And anyway, there's an All for Strings book. It's a kind of an older book, if you can still get your hands on it. It's called All for Strings, and it was a method book that people probably used mostly around the 70s and 80s. I like that one because it really digs into all of the you just drill and kill some things, which you kind of have to do sometimes in the beginning stages. So if you can find the All for Strings book 1, I think that's a really good starter book. It does seem to be very sequential, and you get to play some things over and over before you add a new element. So I think that's a good one if you're going to go with a method book. Let's see. Okay, what are the biggest challenges that adults face when learning the cello, and how can they overcome them? So, yeah, so I think one of the things that I talked about is just trying to figure out how to teach yourself how to play. And you don't know what to listen for yet when you're first starting. And so part of this is just really listening and getting in touch with that. And also as an older adult, it's really different. Kids are playing because their parents probably wanted them to play, and they go to lessons kind of grunting and I don't want to do this, I don't want to practice. But adults, on the other hand, it's kind of a cool thing because this is something that's probably been in the back of their head a long time. It's a bucket list thing and they really want to do it. So challenges are, okay, you're in an older age and you're trying to do something that's kind of difficult. Muscles don't move the way I have arthritis already coming in. I'm trying to figure out how to work through that right now. So we have our bodies just aren't as elastic as they were when they're younger. So we're dealing with a little bit more of that. But I will say the attention span of adults and the curiosity of adults really does make up for all that. Those that are dedicated and they really do the time to work. So let's see. Okay, question is, do I need to memorize everything I played before I move on? I don't believe so. In fact, if you notice now, a lot of times if you go see a soloist playing a concerto with the symphony orchestra, they don't even have it memorized anymore. It's not so much a thing as it used to be. They have their iPads on stage a lot of times and they're just playing with the music, which to me makes more sense. Why would you go through this terror of having to wonder if you're going to memorize the music when you've got a lot of other stuff you have to focus on? So my take on it is that no, you don't have to have it memorized before you go on. You have to really know it, and probably some of it is memorized, but I don't see that there's necessarily any benefit, unless of course your teacher feels like that's really something you should do. Then of course you want to do that. Hi David from California. And hi Diane. Okay, another question. Let's see. The question is, how should one balance technical exercises, scales and etudes with learning pieces of music? So scales and etudes, I love etudes. I don't love scales. So some of this is going to be, what is it that you need? The reason I love etudes more than scales is because etudes usually have a specific focus for that etude. It might be a right hand bow technique, it might be a left hand technique, or it might be a combination of the two. But you get to play this lovely melody, because a lot of the folks that wrote these, the Dotzauer and the Duport, they're really good. And so you get to focus on that and play a really pretty piece. Scales are something, I think a lot of people like to start scales. It's just a good calm way to begin your practice session with scales. Just focus a little bit more on intonation. So I would say etudes are kind of a big thing because you really do get to dig in and learn that skill really, really well. And then when you work on your literature, of course, within that literature, any etude that you've worked on, probably that little technique is going to pop up in that piece somewhere, and you go, oh yeah, I spent 2 months on this etude, I've got it now, and you just plug that into your piece. So that's what I think the benefit is of that. What are some methods for developing better rhythm and timing as an adult beginner? Okay, so that's a good one. So when you think timing, I'm assuming that you mean, by timing, I'm assuming that you mean staying with the metronome, feeling the rhythm the correct way. I think the best thing to do is to go about rhythm is to take your piece of music and dissect it a little bit and find out where the beats are, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then think about where the half points are on every one of those beats and sort of dissecting it visually so you can see there's patterns in music all the time. And if you learn to recognize certain patterns, rhythmic patterns, you'll be able to click it out pretty quick when you see it in a piece of music. I think clapping to a metronome is a really good thing. If you turn your metronome on, I'm going to grab my metronome real quick. So here is 110. You can start by just clapping with it. Then you can clap every other. And then you can double. So anything you can do with a metronome, because that isn't going to lie, you know, that you can do just to focus on getting better steady rhythms, better, more steady with your metronome, that's going to be good too. As far as method books, I mean, there's rhythm everywhere. You can go through and just grab any etude and see if you can clap the rhythm in the etude. Probably you're going to see the same rhythmic pattern over and over and over. And then you're going to get pretty good at that rhythmic pattern. So that's what I would say. Okay, so then the next one was, how do you have any tips on creating an effective practice routine that fits into a busy adult schedule? Yeah. So I think if you can fit some time in every day, and, you know, it doesn't have to be your most impassioned playing. It doesn't have to be just, you know, it just has to be some time bow on the string. If you just have 5 minutes, even if you're exhausted, pick that 5 minutes to just play one shift, play 3 different notes, really listening and feeling the difference. Because again, when I interviewed Beyond Saying, one of the things that he said is that when you practice, you want to practice in such a way that what you do is making you globally better, or globally worse is what you want to avoid, right? So it's practicing something that's just going to help you, even if it's 3 notes. Well, you're learning spatial distance between those 3 notes. You're getting your ear tuned into the correct intonation. So that's globally going to help you every single time that you sit down and want to play those 3 notes. So if you're busy and just don't have time, a little tiny bit goes a long way. Forget about the 2 hours, 3 hours. That's just not going to be helpful if it's not going to be good practice. More concentrated, focused practice is really just what you need. And even if you just do it a couple days a week, that's all you need. One of the things that we do in Cello Discovery, we have a 15-day practice challenge. We also have a 5-day that we did last month. And it's just a matter of, can you do 5 consecutive days in a row? Even if it's 5 minutes, that counts. 15 days in a row, as I found out, was challenging because I missed a day in there and I just started back over from the beginning. But trying to be consistent in your practice is really good. So how do I improve my did I miss one? No. What can I do to improve my left hand flexibility as an older person? I love that. Some of you that are on here that know me, and I didn't bring it up here, I'm a strong believer in arm strength to help your hand strength. It's all tied in together. So if you can do anything that's going to strengthen your arms, strengthen your forearms, and of course, strengthen your hands, pardon me, you guys, you're going to get better flexibility. There's the rubber band trick that I show everybody. If you can get a rubber band that's, you know, about that size, that's a little thicker one, and you put it right around the tips of the fingers here, not back in here, but right about in here, and you make this shape. And you very, very, very slowly open your hand, big spider. You kind of hold it like that for just a couple seconds, and then you slowly bring it back again. This is the kind of thing you can do at work, you know, when you're watching TV, whatever it is. It's a very slow exercise that builds a lot of strength and dexterity in your fingers, and that's really what you want to have. So try little strengthening tips, because I do firmly believe in that. What are some tips for building muscle memory efficiency during practice? It's that spatial awareness, getting in touch with how the space around you feels. And when you're practicing something, you know, and then we also come to the issue of tapes or no tapes, and there's quite a debate about that. But I'm under the feeling that 1 or 2 tapes can help people that really haven't yet found how to find that pitch. Just putting 1 tape or maybe 2 tapes just to give a starting point for beginners. And you want to avoid this because that's not good technique. But just putting your hands there and feeling it, looking to make sure, peripherally looking to make sure it's good. You know, lifting 1 finger and lowering it, see if you can get it to the same place every time. maybe lifting 2 fingers and seeing if you can get them to go down the same place every time. Maybe keeping 1 down and lifting 2, 3, and 4 and keeping them in the same place every time. Something that's just going to be a repetitious motion that's going to help you do that. Okay, phrasing and color is not easy. I think I have it until I hear myself. Do you have any advice? Okay, so phrasing and color. So what she means by that is the story that you're telling in the music. I always like to make this example when I talk to my students. If I read her little blurb and I said, phrasing and color is not easy, I think I have it until I hear myself. Do you have any advice? So, but if you were to make inflections, phrasing and color is just not easy. I think I have it until I hear myself. I mean, that's exactly what you're doing when you're playing a piece of music. And I think I did the humoresque a minute ago, but you could play humoresque. Probably didn't move a whole lot of people, but I'm thinking this is funny. It's supposed to be funny, right? And so I can give and take a little bit from this note, or maybe take a little bit from that note, as long as it finally lines up a little bit in the right place. Maybe I'll bring out a couple notes more than it says. As one of those kind of general rules, and I say definitely a general rule, but as you're just starting, if the music line goes up, just think about doing a little crescendo. If the music line comes down, think about doing a little decrescendo. Again, not a hard, fast rule, but if you're trying to find something that's going to take your playing from, flat line to some more interest, just think about the line. Visually, does the music go up? Audibly, does it go up? Make it a little bit louder. Does it come down? Make it a little bit softer. So those kinds of things sometimes will help you at least get started on that road to pretty color when you play. So the question is, what should I focus on first? Improving my left hand technique or bow control? I never really think about dig in so much on that and then later on go to this. I just think they go hand in hand. I mean, because you're going to play them together anyway. So I do think it depends on what you're working on. If you have a piece that's left hand falls really easy, where you don't have to do much, but your right hand has to do some more fancy footwork, handwork, then I think you have to probably focus more on the right hand for that. I think you really do have to work them together because they always play together. You just might have to slow it down until you get the choreography right, who goes when, and then you can speed it up a little bit. So I don't know, think about them both together. Maybe that's not what you're looking for, but that's kind of how I think about it. How can I work on playing with a more beautiful tone, even as a beginning or intermediate player? So a little bit of that I addressed earlier on. Tone usually comes down to a couple things. One thing that also happens in a very beginning stage is that the beginner doesn't realize how far you need to really sink into the string. They're just thinking pushing it down, but they don't realize that any little tiny gap you have between that string and that fingerboard is not going to give you a pretty sound, The string isn't stopped there, and it has to be really stopped. Versus... So I would suggest start with that and see if your fingers are really sinking into the fingerboard. Don't squeeze. This is going to be counter pressure, not squeezing. Weight comes from above. Sink that weight more into the fingerboard and see if that starts by helping it. The second thing that happens all the time is the terrible, dreaded wolf tone. And every cello has a wolf tone. Some of them are just rowdy as can be, and some of them are barely noticeable, but every cello has one. And it usually lands between the E the F sharp, kind of somewhere there on the D string, you know, that same location on the G string, somewhere in there. And every time a student plays, they get this sound that's just, this is awful, and they don't know what they're doing. I have this little tiny video. I don't know if you can hear it, but it's my student playing last week, and I had to record this wolf tone because it was one of the most rowdy wolf tones I have ever heard. So, of course, I probably won't be able to find it real quick. But it's a pretty awful sound that if you hear it, you're going to know it when you hear it, and I can't find it. But sometimes it's that. Sometimes you're hearing this wolf tone and it's not producing a clear crystal sound. It's because you can't do anything about it. You have to get a wolf tone eliminator to put on there. So, yeah. A beautiful tone, though, if you're just really focusing on the weight, the speed, and the contact point of the bow, along with the weight into the fingerboard, you're going to get a good sound. So your contact point is always going to be trying to stay more or less in that same location, trying to pretty much stay parallel with the bridge here, perpendicular to your string. So that's the first thing. Contact point sometimes with beginners can look like that, and you can hear the sound. So really steady. Second thing is the weight. If you got too much weight, you get that. If you don't have enough weight into the string, you get that. And the third thing is the speed of the bow. Now I might have a good weight, but if I go too fast, I don't get a good tone. I'm using too much bow. Or if I've got not enough speed. So those are the things: weight, speed, contact point, along with how much weight is going into the fingerboard from your left hand. If you focus on those three things, you might find that your tone does get better. Okay, so, interesting. So I can recommend hand massager for arthritis if you have any thoughts. Sure, you can get my email off my website. Yeah, arthritis is one of those things that as an adult playing, you know, I've been playing since I was 10 years old, and so this is new to me. So I'm having to find some things that I do. My pinky just tends to, it's useless right now, so it doesn't do a lot. It shouldn't do a lot anyway. I mean, it's just going to be kind of a little balance point for your hand, but it bends kind of strangely. And my first finger also turns in a little bit now, which it doesn't. So I tend to play first finger a little bit sharp, which I never did. So I have to always think about that first finger going back a little bit. So yeah, things like arthritis as an adult just complicate things a little bit. Somebody asked, how do I approach learning vibrato as an adult, and when should I start? Well, now that is a can of worms. That's the Pandora's box right there. So when should you start learning? So I don't think you should start learning how to do vibrato until you really have got a solid foundation to your tone. You're making a really nice tone. You've learned how to do bow distribution. You can play pretty well in tune. You don't have your tapes anymore. And then you can go to the point shoes after that. So then you can go to vibrato. And then you want to start by doing the pre-vibrato exercises. They're all over the internet. You know, most of them are just the polishing motion, just to get your hand moving in the right direction. Yeah, there's a lot of pre-vibrato exercises. There's the tennis ball that the woman in London came up with some years ago that we all love, that enables you to really hear the way vibrato might sound and how your hand moves correctly. So those are a couple things you can do. Vibrato is one of those very long topics, and there's no easy quick fix. It just takes a long time to train your body to move the right way, because every finger is a little bit different how you move it, and so you're going to have to get comfortable with how each finger moves on the string. And of course, where you are on the string also changes. So I would just say start by doing pre-vibrato exercises, and then have those elements in place of your playing, and then then you can sort of move into applying vibrato, one note at a time to your music. Okay, let's see. From Jonathan. One of the main things I'm struggling with right now is consistency. One day I find a solution for a technical issue, and the next it just doesn't work anymore. Any advice on this issue with self-diagnosis? Yeah, be kind to yourself. It's true forever. It's going to always be the case that way, but you're going to find that it happens less and less. Let's say you're working on a passage of music, and it sounds terrible day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4. Day 5, you have a little breakthrough, and you're like, ooh, I got this. I got this every time. It got better. Day 6, it's back to being there again. But it won't take 5 days. It'll take maybe 4 days to get it back there, and then it'll kind of back up. And finally, there's going to get to the point where you can play that passage most times correctly. So as long as you're really focused on the right things and that you're not allowing yourself to do things incorrectly, you're going to get better at it. It just takes some time. And you all know this, that bad habits are very, very hard to break. So don't let yourself fall into bad habits. And sometimes they're bad habits and you know that you shouldn't be doing them, but it's like, that's easier. I'm just going to do it this way, but it's going to catch you later. So just try to do things the correct way. Even if it's harder right now, it will be easier later on. So consistency, if it gets to the point where it's so frustrating for you to play this passage and you've been working on it over and over, put it aside, put the lid on it, go do something else for a week or 2, and then pull it out and put it back up again and see what happens. Chances are, if you worked on it right the first time, it's probably going to be pretty close when you pick it back up again. But we can get more and more stressed and more tense when we work on a piece of music, and it just doesn't seem to be getting better. In fact, it seems to be getting worse. That's the time to put it away and then revisit it a later time. But again, I do think just work on the right things, little bitty things. It always comes down to 2 notes. Anytime there's a problem, it's usually 2 notes that are the problem. You got to fix those 2 notes. Question, do you have any tips on coordinating the left hand and right hand under pressure? Any mental preparation tips to keep the nerves in check, especially when playing in front of others? Yes, and it's, again, another can of worms. I made a video for YouTube, and then I took it down. Anyway, I think I'll put it back up again. So I went through a very, very serious, I'll finish this one question. I went through a real serious performance anxiety spell, like a long time, and I knew I had to get over it. Like it was making me ill on stage, like about to faint. I came up with a little acronym that I call RISE UP, just because it worked. So when I think about the word rise up, I immediately think this. I immediately think tall. And I usually take a big breath in. When we get nervous, we tend to crawl into ourselves and close up. But when we think rise up, automatically you're going to take a breath and push your feet in the ground, and you'll feel confident. You have to get oxygen to your brain, because when you're nervous, you're like hyperventilating. So get some oxygen to that brain, rise up tall, put a confident body on yourself. It'll help you. What that stands for is R is just to recognize that you're having that moment. You're having a anxiety moment. You're not dying. You're not going to faint. You're not going to puke probably, but you recognize it. I is inhale. That happens automatically when I say rise up. I know I'm having a thing, inhale. And the S stands for say some good stuff to yourself. What we want to do is go, oh my gosh, I'm so nervous. I can't believe I'm doing this. All these people are expecting me to play and I can't do. Okay, well, you got to just say, brain, you can do this. You can do this. You can do this. This isn't that bad. They all love you. It's going to be just fine. You mess up, whoopee, just a mistake. You can do this. So you have to say good stuff. And then the E, which is the hardest to remember, is to elongate. And what I think about is when I talked about taking stress out of your body and elongating those muscles so that you can relax your head, relax your neck. So rise up, exhale slow. And that does help. But this is one of those things that alone isn't going to help. It's a constant practice of training your body to do what it needs to do so that fight or flight doesn't kick in and make you terribly nervous. So you do have to practice it. Make yourself nervous. Play in front of people. Play in front of your camera. I mean, you get nervous playing in front of your camera, so do that is a good way to practice. So it looks like we're about the end of all of our questions, and I want to thank all of you for coming today and being here. It was nice to visit with you. Thank you, Cello Bello. It's always a pleasure to be able to contribute in some way to your site. And if anybody wants to come visit me at Cello Discovery, I would love to have you there. And I hope everybody has a great rest of your weekend. Bye.